So as I start, I want to begin today's talk with a kind of a radical innovation, given everything that you all have been talking about in the 20th century, and that's the American high school. I think we forget, a lot of us, our teenage years feel like a long time ago, but I think we all forget just what an innovation the high school is. Now, you may have thought I was going to say, in terms of remarkable innovation, something about AI or machine learning or algorithms, and that'll come. But the fact is that in 1910, 19% of 15 to 18-year-olds were enrolled in a high school. Barely 9% of all American 18-year-olds graduated from high school. And by 1943, 73% of American youth were enrolled in high schools, and the median American youth had a high school diploma. It's a pretty radical innovation. The high school was a part of America's unique response to the Industrial Revolution. A creative, strategic response where for decades America was the only country in the world to provide secondary education in schools that were free and accessible in the main. Since we all know, obviously, until well past Brown v. Board, there were significant challenges in terms of access. Now, we've seen a lot of really positive data from our high schools in the last year. I take great pride in the fact that our last year in the White House was the first year in decades that we saw progress on graduation rates across demographics. But I don't want to suggest that our high schools today are as good as they should or can be, notwithstanding remarkable innovations that many of you are undertaking. Or whether access to technology is as robust and broad as it should be. But it is important, I think, to start this conversation with a consideration of a pretty unique revolution in our policymaking, namely the creation of the high school. Now, we're in Silicon Valley where in Minnesota we like hockey sticks too. Here in Silicon Valley you like hockey stick curves. So take a look at this one, which shows the effect of the steam engine and the ability to generate massive amounts of mechanical power on human development. The first machine age wasn't just about technology. The effects on the economy and the society were just as drastic as people moved into cities, as we began urban planning, as we invented mass transportation, and more people entered the workforce. Eventually, by the way, with protections for their safety, investments in their health, and even, we're reminded this morning with the jobs report coming out, protections through unions for their wages. We're only beginning to see the kinds of changes that will come, I believe, with the AI revolution, which is, in many ways, the next industrial revolution, in my view. So we talk a lot about how things have changed, for better and for worse. According to a report from the Economist Intelligence Unit, which is portrayed here, 44% of executives say that delaying AI or artificial intelligence implementation will make their business vulnerable to new disruptive tech startups. And 84% of American companies, as a result, anticipate to be, quote, AI to be actively implemented in their part of the business within the next 3 years. 84% of companies anticipate AI being actively implemented in their part of industry within the next 3 years. So this pace of change, I argue, will usher in almost unimaginable change. Consider this. At the end of 8 years of the Obama administration, we transferred roughly 400 million emails, and additionally, additional hundreds of millions of digital documents to the archives of the United States as presidential records. That's over 8 years. Now consider this, I learned last week at IBM that 90% of the existing data in our global ecosystem has been created in the last 2 years. So that doesn't count all those emails that we generated in the White House. 90% of the data generated in the global economy has been generated in the last 2 years. The proliferation of data has added fuel for the development of AI and machine learning in remarkable quantity. Now, 1997, I think you all remember this, Deep Blue beats Garry Kasparov in chess. Okay? Deep Blue being the initial IBM investment in artificial intelligence, Garry Kasparov being the highest rated chess player in the country. Partly as a result of the proliferation of data over this period, you see what happens in terms of computer play in chess as against best human play. The shape of that curve in the middle part of the last decade is pretty remarkable. Machines are getting better and better as they get faster and faster and able to consume more and more data. Now, I was in, as I said, New York last week at IBM, and I saw Watson. I didn't play Watson in chess because, frankly, Watson is now doing everything from retail marketing to healthcare, including diagnosing individual patients, as we saw in our stop up in New York. Now, AI can even process images as well or better than human beings. I urge you to consider this carefully the next time you're at the bakery counter. Fei-Fei Li is a computer scientist here at Stanford. She's a computer scientist at Google, the lead artificial intelligence scientist at Google. And she's a member of the Rework America task force, which I'll get into in a minute. She created something called the Imagenet Lab, which is a database of 15 million named and labeled images, including muffins, puppies, and, of course, a lot of cats. The database feeds into a network of artificial neural networks, teaching the machine to recognize images based on patterns it discerns from large amounts of data. We can't describe how we know what is a muffin and what is a puppy. If we could describe that to a machine, I guess we could teach the machine, or we could program the machine to do it. But the fact that we can't describe it leads to something that's called the Polanyi's paradox, that we know more things than we can tell. So we couldn't program a computer to discern the difference between these images. But it turns out, based on Fei-Fei's database, the machines, after being supplied a sufficient amount of data, can learn themselves pattern recognition and can identify the differences in the same indescribable way that we as humans do. Now, there's a different way to look at this, which is if Garry Kasparov lost a Big Blue in 1997, arguably an even more revolutionary change came in 2016, just over a year ago, when Alphago, which is a computer program that plays the board game Go, faced off against the world champion Lee Sedol, who's a depicted here in this picture, in a 5-game match of Go. Lee Sedol was the most highly ranked Go player in the world. And Go players tell me, I've never played it, but it is a much more complex game because of the number of pieces on the board and the number of, therefore, of strategies, a much more complex game than chess. So nobody expected the outcome in March 2016 when Google's Alphago faced off against Lee Sedol. 5 games, 1 win for Sedol, 4 wins for Alphago. Now, like Feifei's database, Alphago demonstrates the power of a next generation of artificial intelligence or machine learning based on neural networks. Consider this. The programmers at DeepMind, which is the artificial intelligence unit of Google, who programmed and built Alphago, now can start Alphago playing the game, but they don't know what move Alphago will make next. This strikes me as a pretty substantial set of changes coming in our economy. But as much as we focus on, and in fact are consumed by, this technological change, we talk less about the things that haven't changed, including, in too many places, our education, and including, in my view, everywhere, our labor market. Universal high school was innovative when it was introduced in the early 20th century, but what's the high school innovation of today? What's the radical innovation in education and training that will enable Americans to stay competitive as workers throughout this revolutionary bit of change? So I don't know the answers to all these questions. Many of you do, thanks be to God. But that's the question I'm focusing on in my work now that I'm out of the government. At the Markle Foundation, we've created what's called the Rework America Task Force, where we're bringing together leaders from American business, technology, labor, academic, and policy communities to work with American employers, workers, job seekers, and educators in an urgent effort to disrupt the labor market and provide good jobs in the midst of this change. This is not just an analytical exercise, but it's committed on piloting and scaling practical solutions for American workers who are witnessing this remarkable change. Our labor market still works as it did for the Industrial Revolution. Unfortunately, the economy is now in a post-Industrial Revolution space. Our workers deserve a much more, therefore, effective labor market. It's an ambitious vision we have. It starts with an ecosystem for training the workers of the workforce of the future. We challenge ourselves to think about what needs to be reformed, what skills do we need to inculcate in the 21st century students? Can we rely on a one-and-done model where students go to school until they're 18 or 22, if they go to university, and then they're done? It seems clear the answer to that, as you all live, is no. And that we, as a society, will need to embrace new models of continual learning and a labor market that's based on skills rather than any particular credential or degree. So what do I mean by that? Well, robots are not just going to take most jobs. What history tells us is that technological innovations take tasks, not jobs. This is a fairly simple chart from one of our colleagues, another member of the task force, an economist, Alan Kruger, who looked historically at what happened after the Industrial Revolution in terms of jobs. If you just broadly categorize skills of any individual worker in those three broad columns, physical skills, cognitive skills, and social skills, technology was able to replace tasks related with those skills that are routine. Now, a different way to look at it is this way, which is a McKinsey, this is a little more, it's a McKinsey chart, so it's a little more gussied up. You know, this is what the White House economists used to do. This is what McKinsey does. Okay? So I don't know how we get trillions of dollars in debt from these, and McKinsey gets what it does from this. But anyway, that's a different challenge that we'll need another task force on. Nevertheless, a McKinsey Global Institute study encompassed 46 countries and 80% of the global workforce. And it found that relatively few occupations, fewer than 5%, could be fully automated. That's the top of the tree here. It found that is to say, fewer than 5% could be fully automated. That is to say, fully replaced by a machine. But some 60% of all occupations could have at least 30% of the tasks that they do automated. That's based on current demonstrated technologies today. That's not based on anticipated changes in AI over the coming decade. That's based on demonstrated technologies today. So, this is a pretty substantial bit of disruption coming to our labor market. Here's another way to look at it, which is basically that automation is technically feasible for many types of activities in every industry sector, but some are going to be more impacted than others. So, we're already experiencing what is variously called a skills gap in our economy. I believe it's about to get more exacerbated by the trends that are characterized in these charts. The same McKinsey study that I just have shown you found that lower and middle wage jobs will experience the largest effect. Lower and middle wage jobs will be most disrupted. So we see this morning in the Department of Labor's report that wage growth is on target this year, if data holds at the current level, for about 3% wage growth across sectors in the United States. That's historically high for the last 2 decades. If McKinsey is correct, wage softness will be a direct outcome of this AI revolution in the sectors that are softest already, lower and middle wage workers. But by the way, it's not just lower and middle wage workers. Consider law firms. Right now, the lifeblood of first-year, second-year associates in law firms has traditionally been discovery. Your partner's got a big project, a big case to work. You give a big stack of files to your associates. You give them several pots of coffee, or maybe it's Red Bull now, and you tell them to get to work. Increasingly, that work's given to machines. So, law school graduates are having a hard time finding first-year associate jobs for the first time in a long time. I remember, too, when President Obama came back from a trip here, Silicon Valley, in 2014, I believe it was. He told me about a young computer scientist he met. For some reason, it sticks in the back of my head as a 15-year-old, right, who's developing a new technology to review lung x-rays, which are now digitized and available from all over the world. He developed a technology that can review more lung x-rays faster and with fewer errors than humans. I remember what the president said. Radiologists is a pretty good job. Nice salary, a lot of growth. It's mobile. Then he stopped. At least it used to be a pretty good job, he said. Lower middle wage workers, lawyers, radiologists. There's great challenge coming in our labor market. So what are we doing about it? It's imperative that we generate new pathways to good jobs. That's why the Markle Foundation, along with our partners in the state of Colorado, LinkedIn, Microsoft, and many others, have been piloting an innovative initiative that we call Skillful. Skillful helps employers widen their talent pool by implementing skills-based practices, including hiring based on skills rather than degrees. Identifying the worker you need by the skills she has rather than a degree that she may not. Since 70% of Americans don't have a 4-year college degree. 70%. Skillful empowers career coaches to better support job seekers in the changing economy, launching Governor Hickenlooper's Coaching Corps. Skillful is increasing access to data to help job seekers, educators, and businesses make smart employment decisions about building skills. And Skillful also works to ensure that job seekers are trained in demand skill sets. All of this is with the ultimate goal of building a more fruitful job market for employers and for job seekers alike. This chart, built by a former McKinsey person, makes a simple point, which is for us to be successful in a labor market in the 21st century, we have to reform the entire ecosystem. Education, training, worker, and employer. Much like you witnessed in Germany when you were there. So Skillful also works to ensure that not only are we making these changes in Colorado, but we're looking for new states in which to expand. Now, the state of Colorado itself now has begun hiring new state employees based on skills rather than on degrees. We have now set up new partnerships not only with our partnering companies, but with intermediaries throughout the economy. We have sector partnerships and industry associations to create awareness among other companies who haven't seen this work yet in an effort to try to create contagion among employers. We're putting together what we call the TPOT, the Training Provider Outcomes Toolkit, in a partnership with the University of Chicago to bring this practice to other states in the union. And we're working with educators in the state of Colorado to ensure that training programs and educational programs include outcomes so that people know what they're getting, students know what they're getting when they start a program, not just wondering what they might. The Rework America Task Force also draws on similar experiences from across the economy. Consider Siemens USA. Its partner is obviously the German company Siemens. It's developed the gold standard of apprenticeships, pairing on-the-job training with college coursework driven by business demand from Siemens manufacturing facilities so that trainees move right into jobs and are expanding from 4 to 9 states this year. IBM, another task force member, has P-Tech schools, which are schools in grades 9 to 14, a public school model that graduates students with a high school diploma and 2 years of free schooling to get an associate's degree linked to a growth industry in IBM's ecosystem. When they finish year 14, they're first in line for jobs at IBM. California community colleges. Eloy Ortiz is on our task force. You just heard all about what they're doing, so I'm not going to dwell on that. Arizona State University, rethinking the on-ramp to earning a college degree through what they call the Global Freshman Academy, a revolutionary collaboration offering first-year college-level courses for academic credit on their edX platform. Something called SamaSource and its Sama School. It combines online and in-person trainings and is partnering on the first ever government-funded gig economy pilot and a fascinating company in Baltimore called Catalyte, which uses AI to identify individuals regardless of background with innate potential and cognitive ability to be great software developers and trains them so they get good jobs in tech. They do this through an online AI-based training exercise. Now we're looking at how we use these collaborations and others to scale up and increase the impact of these efforts. So initiatives like Skillful, P-Tech, Doing What Counts, the Global Freshman Academy, Sama School, and Catalyte are why, and frankly all of you in this room, are why I have great optimism about how we come out the other side of this revolutionary period. But it won't happen unless we're intentional about it. It won't happen unless we all get together the way Martha has us getting together today to ensure that we're working it. Because yes, the American economy is changing, but it's always been changing. The United States has traditionally recognized and harnessed technological change to advance American opportunity. This time shouldn't be any different. The question is, what are the new tools that we bring to the fight this time, as we did more than 100 years ago? So I thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you.